Welcome inside CFP today, everyone. It is Wednesday, November 6th, 2024. No politics on this show. Nope, not talking about it. Nope, just football. Just Canadian football. It's brought to you, as always, by Fox 40. Thank you to our friends at Fox 40 for supporting Canadian football perspective. You can use the code CFP15 at checkout for 15% off your order when you go to fox40shop.com and get anything and everything that you need in order to make things right for you and your football team. Yates Cup, again, coming up. It will be this Saturday. I will give you more details as we get closer to that one. Tomorrow, actually on Thursday, I will be hosting the OUA Awards, which I'm very thankful to get an opportunity to do. It's a super fun way to kind of, I don't want to say kick off the Yates Cup week, because obviously by Thursday you're 48 hours away from kick, but it's a nice way to kind of get the juices flowing a little bit, see some of the top players from obviously Wilfrid Laurier and Western, but there's also a lot of guys there that are, when you talk about OUA Rookie of the Year nominees and winners and past winners and CFL players that are around and end up coming to the OUA Awards, and it's a fun event to be able to, and honestly, they do a fantastic job of putting it on at Tim Hortons Field as well, which is great. And Russ Jackson's there. You can't go wrong because they give out the Russ Jackson Award. So always good to be able to see Russ and get a chance to talk with him for a couple of minutes here and there. So looking forward to doing that coming up on tomorrow on Thursday. But for right now, just a bit of an early look ahead. I figured I'd do kind of one of these earlier in the week previews of the Eastern Final and the Western Final. And then, later in the week as we get closer and depth charts are out and kind of nail down some more of the specifics and head into the kick itself. But the biggest thing that jumps out to me about these three matchups for each of these teams against each other this year, right? 6 total games, is all year long I have been essentially saying, whether it's here or CFL.ca written content or on air on TSN, that there's been 3 different seasons within this season. Statistically speaking, it doesn't make a lot of sense to look at the full length of the year and say that's what the Bombers are, that's what the Riders are, because Saskatchewan begins 5-0, or and then they go 0-6, and then they finish 4-1, and like Winnipeg, obviously they're 0-4, and then they pick up a couple of games and lose a couple more games, so now they're 2-6. They go on an 8-game winning streak, and then down the stretch, it's not the most convincing thing of all time. Like Oliveira's not dominant, and Dembski's not scoring 2 touchdowns a game like he was in 2019. So there's been moments this season for every team where there's been a reason to doubt them. I think it's why it's left the MOP conversation wide open. When I talked yesterday about, I think, Bo Levi Mitchell is it. I think Bo is there, not just because of all of his statistics, but because nobody else stepped up from one of these teams that was leading the division. And so it's very rare that you have that spot in the CFL, because usually it's the best player on the best team who ends up jumping into that conversation, kind of dominating it. It's just not so this season. So if I'm looking kind of big picture, when you go back to early in the year, it's Cam Dukes is the starter for the Toronto Argonauts going against Montreal. Well, Montreal's got an explosive passing attack and all the rest, but they end up, Montreal goes into Toronto and gets the victory early in the season. Then a couple weeks later, it's Toronto going to Montreal, and they get a victory because Janarian Grant has a return, Wynton McManus has a pick 6, Cody Fajardo goes out with a hamstring injury, Caleb Evans comes in, doesn't play great, and then basically it's like Dukes does enough, and they get a victory on the road in Montreal, which was a great result for them. And then they don't play again until later on in the season. But all 3 of those games, totally different vibe. Like even Liram Hairolahu going 8 of 8 in field goals in that 37-31 victory, I believe it was, for Toronto at home against Montreal late in the year. That was a message-sending game, and it was a kicker that had to win it for them. So it's like Toronto was essentially beaten Montreal with defense and special teams, the 2 victories that they got. And the first one was just Fajardo being on fire and playing against Cam Dukes, who is essentially the 2nd or 3rd string quarterback for the Argonauts. So that matchup of those teams I find really intriguing. And doing the CFL.ca articles this week on who has the advantage, who has the edge, when you start piecing it together, it's like, well, I think Fajardo's been dinged throughout the year, whether it's the hamstring or other ailments. So you give the advantage there, I think, to Chad Kelly based on the explosive passing attack the Argonauts showed in the Eastern semifinal against Ottawa. Then you go to the running back spot. I love Kadeem Carey. I think his game is great. But I also think Walter Fletcher just adds the extra dynamic of catching the ball out of the backfield. The offensive line, the Argonauts are dominant, but Montreal has been solid as ever. Pass rush, it's the Argos. They've got the most sacks on the season, tackles for loss, like just disrupting the backfield. Linebackers, Wynton McManus is amazing, but you got to think that it's the combination of Darnell Sankey and Tyrese Bev-Red. And on the back end, defensive back play, a bit of a toss-up for me, in all honesty, but I would lean towards Montreal on that. So it really becomes a question in the Eastern Final of, can Chad Kelly continue to be explosive, and can he beat a very confusing Noel Thorpe defense? Because Noel is going to show you the exact same look and play 3 or 4 different blitzes and coverages and everything in behind it, which makes for a huge challenge for any quarterback, especially one who's only played in 2 career CFL playoff games. And last year when he got thrown into the blender, Noel Thorpe basically embarrassed Chad Kelly and the Argonauts on their field. Kelly trying to go into Percival Molson and do that back, I don't think he will outwardly say that's motivation, but I think internally he would love nothing more than to go to Montreal and break their hearts because they broke him over their knee last year. So will he verbalize that? Who knows? Will he play like he's trying to do that? Potentially, and I think that could be good. That could also be very bad. Because if Chad goes in and tries to beat the world with every single throw, that's how you typically get yourself in trouble. But I also say that as somebody who played quarterback and did not have the talent that Chad Kelly has, because when Chad tries to throw it through a brick wall, 99 times out of 100, it goes through the brick wall. And it's nothing I was able to ever do or come away from without putting the ball in bad positions or up for grabs or all the rest. So Chad Kelly against Montreal's defense is theater. I think honestly, regardless of what the Grey Cup matchup is, I think Chad Kelly against Noel Thorpe is the most entertaining matchup that remains in the playoffs in terms of unit versus unit and based on the stars that are on either side of the football. And then the Western Final, I think the biggest thing is, does Saskatchewan actually want to run the football, or do they just want to threaten you with running the football? Because A.J. Ouellette was very good, but, and this kind of drives me crazy about the Canadian Football League sometimes, you have running backs. We talk about running backs. They use running backs. But realistically, what's a good day for a CFL running back? It's 10 carries for 65 to 80 yards. It's not game-changing. Like maybe if you want to own the time of possession, if you're trying to grind things out in the second half. Like Brady Oliveira, when the Bombers have been at their best, he'll get 8 carries in a drive and essentially be good for 60 yards in a single drive, and they score a touchdown, and you're like, whoa, they just moved the line of scrimmage, and Brady dominated. He was running through arm tackles, couldn't be brought down. That's the stuff that really changes games. It's not massive statistics. It's the timely runs. It's the runs that hurt the other team because you maintain possession, you keep running the clock, all the rest. I am not convinced that Saskatchewan actually wants to try and pound the rock 25 times in this game. Maybe because of crowd noise and all the rest, they try to do that, but I think they want to threaten you, like hold a knife out and go, we're going to run it. We're going to run it. Watch this. Don't you believe us? We're going to run it. And then they just do what Trevor Harris does, which is dink and dunk and crossers and dig route and curl and here and get on the same page with Kean Schaefer-Baker and Del Duncan Busby when he gets his odd rare target, or Keyshawn Johnson coming into the ball game, or Samuel Emlis being a total stud, evolving this year into one of the best receivers in the Canadian Football League. I think Saskatchewan wants to lean on Trevor. They don't want Trevor to be watching somebody else holding the football, even if that is A.J. Ouellette, who they targeted in free agency. I think A.J. is going to get his. He's going to have a couple of explosive runs. He's going to have some timely runs, meaningful runs. But does Saskatchewan actually want to pound it, or are they just going to kind of lean on that and actually just try to beat you with Trevor Harris? I think that's what this game is all about against a Bombers defense that has been one of the best in the second half of the season, but like Tyrell Ford is going to have to come up with a couple of interceptions, I think, in order to try and negate things, because the Bombers offense, even though they've gotten better in the second half, they have not looked like Winnipeg of years gone by. And I think that Saskatchewan's defense is going to make them earn it. And the real question here is if Saskatchewan's able to get a couple of turnovers in this game defensively, like they've been able to do with their ridiculous turnover margin that they have on the year, can Winnipeg's offense recover from putting their defense in bad field position with a turnover? Or can Zach recover from throwing 2 picks and still stay aggressive and not be afraid to throw the third because he's afraid it might hurt his team even more? That's the challenge. That's the headache, I think, that is directly in front of Winnipeg going against a very good Saskatchewan defense. So looking forward to seeing how these games shake out. As I say, I'll have more as the time goes on and we get ready for all things coming up here in the Eastern final and the Western final. Again, Fox 40 CFP 15 at checkout, 15% off your order. Fox40shop.com is where you can go. Thanks for listening. CFP today.